All right, everyone. Welcome to the Investor Evolution Podcast. I'm your host, Kimberly Hoyt. Today we have a special guest, Carlos Salguero, and he is with CS3 Investments. And this company acquires and manages real estate properties with a focus on both near-term income generation and long-term value creation. Carlos is the president and CEO, and he created CS3 Investments to provide everyday investors access to institutional grade real estate deals that are normally reserved for only large investors. So today, welcome, Carlos. I'm excited to have you with us.
Thank you, Kimberly. It's my pleasure to be here with you and share with your audience some of the things I've learned along the way.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. I know you're in the middle of some big deals right now, and we'll get to that. But first, what I'd love to do is take you back and have you walk us through the beginning of your real estate journey, where you started, kind of what were your roots? How did you get into this real estate space?
Yeah, I've always loved real estate. My dad was a small business owner, and when he was on the come up, and I was a kid, I saw him build a little warehouse that then became multiple warehouses together. So I grew around that. I grew around his farm. He also bought some land, and so I always heard about it. He never like sat me down and said, "Kid, this is how you do it," or anything like that. But once I was old enough, I always thought about, hey, I want to buy my first home. That was, universal desire that people have. But then as soon as I did that, I wanted to buy more property because I heard a stat at some point that said 90% of millionaires become wealthy because of real estate. And I was like, that's a very high number. So statistically, and I'm an engineer by education and background. So statistically, I wanted to stack the odds in my favor. So I'm like, look, if 90% of people that actually pursue real estate as an investment became millionaires, then my odds of becoming a millionaire, which I've always wanted to be, are better. So that's the beginning of it. My curiosity was around that piece. And I was always entrepreneurial. So when I was working as a W-2 employee for Hewlett Packard as an engineer, even back then, I was always like walking properties, seeing things. I didn't know how to do it, honestly. And while I was a W-2 employee, I never bought real estate. I only rented real estate. So that came after my W-2 journey in starting businesses. So that was the beginning.
I love that. Okay, so you're in your W-2, you're thinking about real estate, and then tell me what took you from Hewlett Packard to CS3 and this big empire that
Yeah.
you're beginning to build.
Yeah, so that's a little bit of a journey, and Hewlett Packard was a great employer. I traveled all over the world, had a great salary, good benefits, but like any corporate institution, there is ups and downs. And a multi-billion-dollar company in the Silicon Valley in California. I started as a free intern because they wouldn't hire engineers without experience. So I'm like, look, I don't need money. I just need a foot in the door, and let me go show you what I can do. So I got my foot in the door, then became an engineer, a junior engineer, a senior engineer, and then quickly I became engineering manager for North America Printing. So now I had a group under me. I was still in my 20s, early 20s, and it was tough because a lot of the employees were older than me. So 20-something-year-old managing a 40-year-old engineer, a 50-year-old engineer. So I kind of had to outwork everybody else to earn the respect. That was the only way to do it. And of course, like anything, in those days, it was the early 2000s. We had what was called the dot-com bubble in the Silicon Valley. The internet was just getting its footing, and a lot of startups starting, kind of like the IA revolution right now, right? The startup galores. Everybody's an AI entrepreneur right now. Back in those days, it was everybody's an internet entrepreneur, and there was a million startups. And I saw a lot of the current engineers at HP go to the startups because they had, stock options and bonuses and this and that, and you're going to become a multi-millionaire and all that stuff. But I was so young and inexperienced that I was like, you know what? I need kind of the protection of this big company that has been around already for multiple decades. So that part, from my part, was a great call. But as soon as the startups started going bankrupt in the dot-com bubble popped, now all the startups go bankrupt. And then the big corporations, when that happens, they compress, right? They kind of protect themselves. They want to protect their business. So I was told, Carlos, you got to fire half of your team. That's the only way that we can keep this thing going. I was not in agreement with that. Like, I was young, inexperienced, still kind of a little bit of a rebel. And I'm like, hey, what can we do to avoid firing people? How can we save their jobs? Can we cut costs somewhere else? And corporate rules are a little bit inflexible many times. So they're like, Carlos, just do what we tell you. This comes from high above, way above your pay grade. Just do it. So I did it, and it was one of the hardest things I ever did was fire 50 employees that had families, mortgages, kids in college, all these things. Mm-hmm. And then I thought I had my job safe. Sure enough, 2-3 weeks later, because I was the rebellious kind and I was not the non-compliant, guess who got fired?
Oh,
right? I got the boot.
Ouch.
And I'm like, okay, now I have to go figure things out. And, that gave me such a sour taste for corporate that I could have gone and applied to other companies. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to go try my luck and start a business on the side. Mm-hmm. And because I'm very curious, and because I had already by then started exploring with selling online, and eBay was becoming a thing back in those days, I started selling on eBay even before getting fired. And I was making a little money on the side. It was my side gig. So when I was forced to retire,
right,
like my early retirement with no money,
right.
I was like, okay, let's learn this eBay thing. Let's learn this e-commerce thing. Mm-hmm. And back in those days, everybody's saying, you're crazy. It's not going to work. Go get a job. You went to school for engineering. You have a master's degree in business, all this stuff. And I was like, look, I'm making a little money. And I'm like, I was super part-time. What if I just put some more time? And I was single, so I had not much to lose back in those days. And I doubled down, Kim, and it started working. And I moved back to Colorado to contain my costs, because Silicon Valley, even back then, was like super expensive. Everything was like super, super pricey. And Colorado was still, back in those days, not anymore, inexpensive. And, moved back into my mom's house, moved back into my mom's basement for an office, rented her garage. So I was renting her a bedroom, a basement, and a garage for my business. And of course, the business starts doing okay. And then I need employees. And I tell my mom, hey, you want to quit your job? Come work with me. And she said, yes. My first employee was my mom. Then my stepdad, who was working in the casinos here in the mountains. As you know, with Colorado, there's casinos in the mountains. And he was commuting 2 hours to work and 2 hours back. And I'm like, hey, Larry, you want to work with me? And he's like, yeah, of course. So those were my first 2 employees. Then I met my wife after we got married. 6 months later, I made her quit her job, right? And then she had a good corporate job with benefits and health and all that stuff. And I'm like, look, this is the dream. So I sold her the dream.
I love that.
And she bought into it, and she quit, and she was my 3rd employee. And then, we moved from the house to a rented warehouse, small at first. And then we started busting at the seams, another rented warehouse. And I started having a taste for what being a commercial tenant is all about. Base rent, the triple net reimbursements. And I was just so excited that, my business was working, making money and stuff like that. And of course, I was working 100 hours a week, 7 days a week. Nothing mattered, right? I told my wife when she met me, look, are you sure you want to be with me? Because I'm gonna do this. This is my dream. This is my goal, and it's gonna require for me to be working a lot more time that you're gonna be comfortable with. So if you're cool with that, then let's go. If not, it's okay too. That was the beginning, Kim. Yeah.
Okay, so at that point, a couple of things that I love. One, you started, we're going to go backtrack a little bit. One, you started as an unpaid intern. And I want everyone to hear that, because I think we've all kind of been in that place where we're doing a lot of work and you're not getting paid for it. But,
Yep.
it is kind of like where if you can kind of lay that foundation, that's going to be the rocket fuel to get you going. So
Oh,
I love that piece of your story, that's kind of how you started, even though it wasn't where you ended up. But question with where you were at that point with eBay, what what was the vision then? Was it still to get
yep.
into commercial real estate at that point?
No, no, not at all. So e-commerce was my ticket, right? I thought, dude, e-commerce is my ticket. This is what I'm gonna do. And as I started making money with that, and I started being a tenant,
Mhm.
and like you said, I was working for free for Hewlett Packard. I was working for free for my business for the first 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
Every entrepreneur does it. Like you don't get paid. Your bills get paid, but you don't get paid.
Right.
So you're working for free. And then I started making a little bit of money. And then my wife and I, we had a small townhome. And then, we've always been super frugal. We were saving every penny we had extra to pour it back into the business. So every extra dollar that we had was going back into the business, back into the business, back into the business.
Mhm.
Eventually, our business starts making some decent money, and we're ready to upgrade homes. And then we go buy a house that back in those days still, new build in the 200,000s, right? That doesn't exist here in Denver anymore. But instead of selling our townhome, and this was a good move that we made early on, instead of selling our townhome, we kept it. And we said, we're going to rent it, create some extra income. Because our loan by that point was smaller, and we became landlords for the first time. And that was the entry point to real estate as a hobby at first.
Gotcha.
Because it was not my main thing. It was my hobby at first. And of course, we went from that townhome to our single family home, kept building the e-commerce business. Eventually, I became top seller on eBay, top seller on Amazon. Eventually, all those things got super saturated.
Mm-hmm.
So I was always looking to, hey, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? So I think one of the things that has helped me a lot, Kimberly, in my journey is I've always been curious for the next level up.
Yeah.
Like, I'm doing this right now. What's the next level up?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Even in e-commerce, I'm selling $100,000 a month. How can I sell $500,000 a month?
Mm-hmm.
$1 million a month, right? I've always been is like, who can I talk to? How can I do it? And there's like, I know some people, and I got stuck in the beginning. Is like, I don't know who to go to. I need to figure out who to go to. Who's at the next level that I can go and get close to, build a relationship, be a student again, and go learn the next level. So I did that in e-commerce multiple times. And then along the way, I had to upgrade warehouses again because I ran out of space. So I went from a 2,500 square feet to a 5,000 to a 10,000. And then every time I would go back to my landlord, Kim, and say, hey, I need to expand. Do you have more space? They always had more space somehow. And they said, yes, we'll rent a bigger place. But every time you upgrade, you have to sign for another 5-year lease. 5-year lease. And that felt like too long for me at some point.
Yeah.
Right. So I started getting that curiosity. I already had a little, 3 homes, 2 homes for rent, one that we lived in. And then I started getting the curiosity like, oh, maybe I should go buy my own warehouse. And, this lasted for about 6 months, 9 months. Started talking to commercial brokers, started telling them, look, I need a warehouse. And then I started getting shown properties. And then, of course, this big warehouse shows up in the radar that was 50,000 square feet.
Okay. So like 5 times.
10,000.
Okay.
Just think about it. I was renting at 10,000. And here comes a broker and tells me, Carlos, here's a 50,000 square feet. I was scared out of my mind.
Yeah.
But I went to go see the property. I didn't close myself to it, right? Like even if I didn't think I could do it, I'm like, yeah, I'll go walk it. I'll go see it. Right?
Mhm.
What is that? Just a little bit of my time. Let's go check. So, and I'm a visual person. Like I'm a visionary, right? So when I see big things, I get inspired, And I go back and then like, look, I need to figure out how to do this, right? There's got to be a way that I can do this. So I go see this property. It was a fixer-upper warehouse, 50,000 square feet here in Denver, right on Federal Boulevard. Like it's one of the main streets in the city. And I'm like, how do I make this happen? And of course, by that point, I started looking into what loan, how do I get, the renovations done? Because it was, very destroyed inside. And I had no idea. I had never done renovation, zero construction experience. I had never financed a big deal. I was typical bootstrapper. Kim, you probably know a lot of business owners that were bootstrappers by nature, right? We don't like loans. We didn't like debt. So it was either my own money or credit cards. And we would try to pay the credit cards the same month that we got the money. So we were on the 30-day cycle of let's make some money, pay the credit card. Let's make some money, pay the credit card, right? If this sounds familiar to anybody listening, because that's the journey of, over half of business owners out there.
Yeah.
And, and it was not easy to buy the building, by the way. I put an offer in. First of all, it was super hard to get a hold of the broker. My broker was hard to get a hold of. The selling broker was get a hold of. This property was owned by the Catholic Church, and they have all the money in the world, so they don't care, right? Like, less than $1 million property is like, if you want it, great. If not, we'll see you in a month.
Right.
So, how I did it? I had to go because they didn't answer the phone. I actually looked up where the office of the selling broker was, and I actually showed up to their office.
Oh, wow.
And I showed up to the office, walked into the office, because then my broker said, Carlos, they're not answering the phone. We can't even do a deal here. And I'm like, yeah, but I want this property. So I showed up to their office, walked into the reception, and says like, he's not here right now. He's going to be back at around so-and-so. I'm like, okay, I'll wait. And I waited like 2 hours in that office until the guy showed up. And I told him, hey, I can't even remember his name anymore. I've been calling you and leaving messages. Oh, yeah. Oh, you're Carlos. Yeah, I'm Carlos. And to myself, I'm thinking, man, this dude hasn't picked up the phone in like a month or called me back or anything like that. And he acted like nonchalant, right? Like, cool. Yeah, you're finally here. You showed up. So I'm like, hey, can we do a deal? Yeah, let's do a deal. Perfect. How do I get a hold of you? That was my question, right?
I love it.
How do I get a hold of you? Do you have a cell phone number? And he gave me his cell phone number.
Oh, okay.
Right.
That was the key. That was missing key.
That was the missing link, because that office number, and back in those days, guys, office numbers were a thing.
Yeah.
Today, everybody gives you their cell. Back in those days, the cell was like this ultimate thing that only friends and family had. Right. So anyways, long story short, we put an offer on the deal. My broker, and you guys have to be careful with this, my broker, my realtor that put the offer in, had another deal that just came after that one that was like almost twice the cost. And he started kind of steering me towards the more expensive property. And I because I had been doing so many deals by that point, I kind of just felt this pressure to go do the bigger property because he knew how much I could afford. And then he told me, look, Carlos, the property you want, the 50,000 square feet, I don't think the city is going to let you occupy with the business that you have, because that property is zoned for retail. And you can only use that property if 75% of your space is retail, meaning a walk-in store, and only 25% can be used for warehouse. And I'm like, that doesn't work, because my business was e-commerce. So I needed all of it warehouse if possible.
Right.
I had no walking people. And I'm like, that was a bummer. I was like thinking. I was like, you know what? I'm going to call the city. and I call the city the next day.
Uh-huh.
And then the city planner picks up the phone, and I'm like, hey, I'm looking at property so and so. Can you tell me what's the zoning? This is my business, and they tell me that I can only use 25% of it for warehouse, 75% for retail. And he's like, no, Carlos, actually, I think your broker called, and I told them that you can use 75% of it for warehouse, but you do have to use 25% for retail. And I'm like, that's just a little bit different to what I heard. So I'm like, thank you so much. Click, picked up the phone, called my broker. Hey, dude, you're fired. I'm like, whoa, why? He's like, you told me that I couldn't use this property for my business. And it's not true. He's like, oh, it must have been a misunderstanding. He's like, no, it wasn't. Like, it was not. It was plain as day. And the city planner had told me, yeah, I sent them an email about it. So it was even in writing.
Mm-hmm.
So now I'm scrambling, man. I don't have a realtor, right? I don't have a broker. So I go to the selling brokers, and he's super happy that I'm going to do the deal without a broker.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
Double commission.
Right?
Double commission. And then I'm like, this is a commercial deal. Like with a house, I wouldn't mind. But this is a commercial deal, I have no idea. So I start calling commercial brokers, find one, super nice lady. And so I call back the guy and said, hey, look, I need representation in this deal. So I'm gonna hire so-and-so for her. And I was honest with him. This is my first commercial purchase. Mm-hmm. And I want everything to go right. So lesson of the story, don't go at it yourself. If you don't have a broker that is very experienced, find a mentor that can teach you how to do things right on the commercial space, right?
For sure.
So again, getting to the property, put an offer. I kind of lowballed them a little bit because I knew it was the Catholic Church and they had all the money in the world. and they accepted only like $25,000 over my lowball offer.
Nice.
Which was $890,000 for a 50,000 square feet, 4-acre warehouse.
That's huge. That's huge.
And I didn't even know what I was buying at that point, right? I was like, oh my God, this is the biggest purchase of my life, commercial wise. Got an SBA loan that gave me 90% of the money. And I had to come up with 10. And the 10 was heavy.
Yeah.
Right? It was like, with closing costs and everything else, it was over $100,000. I picked up every penny that I had. I literally was like turning the glass jars down to make sure that the change that I had could fill these things. So guys, it was a stretch.
Mm-hmm.
It was an absolute stretch, but something was telling me, you got to do this deal, Carlos. Yeah. You got to do this deal. And that was my first commercial purchase. Came 13 years ago now.
Okay. So let's fast forward then. So 13 years ago. So when was your first house purchase? How many years ago was that?
Oh man, that was probably, let me think, probably 12 years prior. So about 25 or so years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
And why I think that's important is just to show that like, it's okay if it takes a little bit of time, right? It's okay that you're not doing everything that you see everyone doing right now, right? Like it's going to take you time to get to where you're going. So 13 years ago was that first commercial purchase, which is awesome. I know there was some business turnover in that time, and then really building this CS3 Investments and that. So I'd like you to take us kind of from that first purchase to where you are now and show us like how this trajectory has just kind of skyrocketed. It's so exciting to hear it.
Yeah, look, so that was the big stretch. I'm so glad I did it. For the next 5 or so years in that warehouse, I was super busy trying to fill it, right? Trying to go 5 times bigger in space. So I was very busy with my thing. But at the same time, we started buying more residential property. So every extra money that I had that the business didn't need, I was buying residential. So we bought an Airbnb in Florida. We started Airbnb-ing our home. Right around when we bought the warehouse, we bought the home that we still own today. That was kind of our dream home back in those days. So now we had a little portfolio, right? About 4 units residential, one commercial. And I started just understanding the residential side of things and how good it can be, but also it took a lot of work. And then my wife started managing the Airbnbs, and she started attending to tenants and stuff like that. And that was fun for like a year until they started calling like at midnight and on the weekends and all that stuff. And I'm like, okay, I think we need to change things a little bit. And again, I was curious about what's the next level. Mm-hmm. What's the bigger level? And as the years went by, I used to get my real estate taxes on the warehouse, right? And every year, those real estate taxes went up, up, up. And I was like, my warehouse is worth how much now? Like every year, it would be like, wow, right? Because it was appreciating so fast. And I'm like, this doesn't even seem right. So it took me a few years of me even being like head down into the e-commerce business. But once a year or so, when I got those real estate tax assessments, I'm like, man, another 500,000 value of the warehouse, another 700,000. And it was like incrementally like that. So I was like, wait a minute. Let me check my commercial against my residential and see what grows faster. And I started looking, and my residential was growing, but my commercial was like exploding in value. And that's when I really understood that residential and commercial are so worlds apart, because residential, the value is worth on the comps. Mm-hmm. And if the houses in your neighborhood grow in value, then your house grows in value. You have no control to that. Yep. Zero control. But in commercial, if rents went up for commercial and you were able to add other revenues and income streams to the property, then the value of the property will grow. And for my warehouse, what I started doing eventually, and this was maybe year 2, year 3, I started renting the parking lot because it's on a main road. So the parking lot now is generating $1,500 a month, just the asphalt, right? And then twice a year, I would have a food truck there for 3 to 6 months, and then a roasted chili vendor for 3 to 6 months, and those became tenants of my parking lot. And then inside the warehouse, I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna start giving storage services because I have a big warehouse and I'm using some of it, but I don't have it. I'm not using 100% of it. I wonder if people need pallet storage and box storage. And I started advertising that, and sure enough, I was now charging not by the square foot, I was charging by the cubic foot.
Oh, wow.
So the boxes that other people own in my warehouse pay a weekly rent by the cubic foot. Wow. So now I can not only take advantage of the flat square feet by the cubes. So, and because I have high ceilings, 18-foot ceilings, I can stack 3 pallets on the pallet racks. So now I'm monetizing. So eventually, what I said along the way came is like, I want to have a free warehouse. Like I want other people to pay my mortgage, my insurance, my real estate taxes, all that stuff, so that my business can ride on this thing, free rent. So you could call it, I house hacked my warehouse. I warehouse hacked my warehouse.
I love that. That's awesome. Nice. Okay, so you've got this thing booming now, so everything is kind of generating. And so what was the next level from there after your warehouse?
Yeah, so now that I know that commercial was better, I was like, what's the value of my warehouse? Right? This was like 7 years in, or maybe 6 years in. And by then I had started a few companies. I had started a nutrition business that was doing super well, and started making a lot of money in e-commerce. But what really caught my attention is that my warehouse in that period of time just in 7 years or so that I had owned it, it had multiplied its value by 5 times.
Wow.
So me buying it for under $1 million, my warehouse was already worth over $5 million. And I'm like, that's insane. Like, how do I learn to do that myself? And that's really when the curiosity started on what kind of properties. And I remember to this day, like I went to Google and I Google searched what properties are considered commercial real estate. And I got a list. There was no AI back then, so I got a Google list. And they said apartment complexes, warehouses, shopping centers, anything over 5 units, residential, industrial, all the lists, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, okay, I want some of these stuff. I already knew industrial, but industrial, I thought it was a little risky because it's not multi-unit. And I always thought, look, I in my businesses, the more customers I had generating me income, the better I felt.
Mm-hmm.
Like I never felt good with a big, large, massive account that at any day could say, Carlos, we found a cheaper guy for the e-commerce or the logistics, I'm out. And that would take away large percentage of my business. So industrial to me had that component of, shoot, man, what if the one tenant decides to go bankrupt or decides to move away or break their lease or whatever. So apartments always sounded sweet to me,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then I started shopping apartments here in Denver. And I have the first offering memorandum of the first property that I Google searched. It was an apartment complex in right around Washington Park, which is, it's a crazy expensive area now. And it was called the Black Swan and the White Swan because they were twin properties. They had done a beautiful job painting them. And one of them had a black swan on it and the other one had a white swan on it. And they were like 2 miles apart. Total 90 unit. And I was looking at this and I had no clue. I had no clue how to offer on it. I had no clue how to underwrite it. I had no clue how to analyze it. I went and walked the property, seemed beautiful. Everything seemed amazing. And I was terrified to pick up the phone and call the broker.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want to sound ignorant.
Mm-hmm.
So me, after making all this money in e-commerce and all that stuff, I'm a student again, right? Mm-hmm. I'm at square one, feeling completely incapable, feeling completely incompetent to go to the next level.
Oh. So what happened next?
So that opportunity, that opportunity slips through my fingers.
Oh no!
Right, and I can underwrite it today, and I can tell you what was worth back then, and what is worth today. It's millions and millions of dollars of appreciation in just the last 7 to 8 years.
Yeah.
So what happened next is like, shoot, I have no clue what commercial real estate is. I need to go learn.
Mm-hmm.
So I went and bought books. I went and paid for conferences. I joined masterminds, and I spent probably a couple $100,000 learning it,
Mm-hmm.
getting familiar with it, going to conferences, joining expensive masterminds. I probably read every book that you can think of in apartments and commercial real estate and all that stuff. Because I was at square one. I went to school again on my own.
Yep.
To learn anything.
Yeah.
And then after 6 months to 9 months, I started, okay, I know what a cap rate is now, right? I know what NOI is now, right? Because I read that in the offering memorandum of the first property I told you about. I was like, oh, I don't know what those things mean. So once my knowledge was there, I think the next step for me is I needed to see somebody that I could relate to
Mm-hmm.
that was doing it.
Gotcha.
And I went to multiple conferences. And at one of those conferences, I saw a guy on stage that was probably about 15, 20 years older than me that said, guys, I started with $3,000. Now I have over $1 billion of multifamily real estate portfolio. And he told his story. And man, that story to me was so inspiring. And not so much because of the accomplishment, but because I said, if that guy can do it, I can do it too.
Right.
And then I went back home. My wife probably thought I was nuts because I was like, baby, I'm going to start putting offers on 10 million, 20 million, 30 million dollar buildings.
Yeah.
And she probably looked at me, and because by now she's very familiar with my crazy, she's like, okay, go ahead. Because she's seen me do, things that at the beginning she probably thought I was nuts. And sure enough, started making the big offers, started getting a lot of no's, started getting turned down. I flew to many properties to walk in, put an offer. Nothing came out of it. Kept spending money. But eventually I found deals. I started finding good deals. I started getting better on the phone. I started getting better at negotiating with the brokers and with the sellers. And eventually I started buying the bigger stuff. But, without me along the way too, because I was frustrated that the big stuff wasn't working yet, I bought a fourplex, I bought a triplex, I bought another triplex, and I thought that was big enough, right? And it wasn't. It was still residential. People call it multifamily, but it's really not multifamily. It's just 3 to 4 units in the same place.
Right. Well, and a couple of things that you said there that I love is you did the work. It may not have worked for you at that point, but what did you learn? You weren't losing. You were learning as you were going. You were building the skills. You were probably with each no, you were figuring out why that wouldn't work, what was wrong with your offer, honing your pitch, so to speak, and really developing those skills. And to where now, like you said, you could hit those white and black swans and you would have your offer down pat and no problem, be able to walk in there with confidence. And so take us to where, so I love that learning and that growth and that just kind of, I don't want to say the failing forward because you weren't failing, you were learning as you were going, right? And I love that you just continued to put the reps in because that's how you get better. It doesn't get easier, you just got better. So
you get better.
Yeah. So take us to where you are now and what, starting from that one that one commercial property that you did so great with through this journey. Where are we now? What does that business look like now to where, what are the deals that you're doing now that you're excited about?
Yeah. So once I felt competent, or at least you're never gonna be 100% ready. Let's just make sure that that's out there, right? No matter how big you go, if someone tells you, "Oh, I've seen it all, I know it all, I can do it all," they're full of it. Because the real people that make it big time, they do it scared. They're still learning it. Right? That's why I always say I'm a forever student of the game. So I start making my bigger offers. Finally, I find a deal that looked really good. I call my friend. This was in Nashville, Tennessee. I call my friend that lives very close to Nashville. Hey, can you go walk this property for me? And can you FaceTime me when you're there? And he's like, yeah, Carlos, I'll do that. And he goes the next day, FaceTime, and said, Carlos, this is beautiful. You should come and walk it yourself. Sure enough, I buy a ticket, travel, talk to the broker. Hey, can I tour the property? And the broker says, hey, can the owner show you the property? And I'm like, sure, right? And by then, I already had put a bunch of offers that they didn't even respond many times. So finally, I'm kind of in there. This owner and broker is showing me the property, beautiful, Class A property that is mixed use, meaning apartments plus shopping center in the first floor. And I'm like, wow, this is a deal that I would love to own. And then I talked to the broker. I talked to the owner. The owner tells me how he was the developer too. So he told me every nook and cranny, every inch, explained every material, explained all that. I bought this crown molding from here, and I bought this door from Connecticut, and I bought this. So it was just his pride and joy. And he was actually living in the property in one of the penthouses. So I spent 3 hours with this guy and to be honest, I maybe asked 2 questions about the property, but I focused more on him than on the property. Like I wanted to build a relationship with a person. And I think that's probably one of the keys of my success in business, that everything you ever want or need is in the hands of someone else.
Yep.
And that someone else doesn't know you yet and needs to get to know you. And you need to not to go him or her. So I got to know him. Interesting enough, his last name was Mr. Swanson. Okay, which gives me the chills right now because my first very property, I don't know if you recall the name, the Black Swan, the White Swan. And I'm like, oh my God, this is just too weird, right? So anyways, tour the property with him. He shows me everything. And he by then knew that I was from Ecuador originally, right? And in his living room in the penthouse, he had a big old map printed in the ceiling with this big 20-person table with chairs. And he said, yeah, Carlos, we've traveled all over the world. I looked you up and I know you're from Ecuador. And we talked about Ecuador for like 15 minutes. And my goal again, build a bond with this guy, because look, you're going to be competing with people that have more experience than you, more money than you, more miles than you, more track record than you. So the only way that you can get in the door with some of these guys is you got to have a connection. Sure enough, we closed on that meeting. He said, Carlos, I hope we do business together. Perfect. Please send your offer. Sent an offer the next day. I didn't lowball him, but I went a little bit under the purchase price. And they said, no, Carlos, you got to offer listing price. And I had already done the math and said, this works at the listing price. So I'm like, okay, no problem. But before I do that, I told my friend, and by then I had asked his secretaries, hey, what does he like? And he said, does he like wine? Does he like, food? He's like, no, he doesn't drink. He's a sweet tooth. He likes sweets. I'm like, oh, cool. So I had my friend go to Crumble Cookie and buy him a box of cookies and deliver in person. Right? So he brings the Crumble cookies. I never heard anything about it until the buyer interview. So now I'm competing with another buyer. The broker tells me, Carlos, you're competing with a group from New York that is $50 million liquid. And this deal was an $18.6 million property. And I'm like, okay, thanks for telling me that. And then we have the buyer interview. And in these big properties, it's not like your residential that, you never talk to the other party. Here, they want to know who you are to see if you're for real and you're going to close and if you can actually swing this thing. So we got on the phone and it's like so serious. Like not a peep. And they start asking their questions like super serious. Like, oh shoot, man, this is not going well. And it was him and his kids, his older kids, right? Because he's in his 80s. So his kids, you think about it, in his like 50s. And I'm like, what do I say? What do I say to like get this room like warmed up? And I'm like, hey, Mr. Swanson, did you like the cookies? And he's like, oh yeah, Carlos, thanks so much for the cookies. That was great. What a great touch. He's like, how many did you eat? He's like, oh, I think I had 2 in there, this pizza sized cookies. So I'm like, okay, cool. That's awesome. And after that little moment, the interview changed tone completely. And we were able to get like where I felt, okay, I think I have a chance at this deal.
Right.
And sure enough, the next day, Carlos, you've been awarded the property or the contract, I should say. I mean, that's kind of how it's called in commercial real estate. You're awarded the contract. Let's go. And that was the event that basically took me to get this deal under contract and then run through the whole process, do the due diligence, go find the money for it, go find the loan, go find the capital, and get it closed.
Nice. And so how long ago did you close on that property? When did you finally get that?
So I bought that one just about, it's going to be 3 years in March of next year.
Okay. Awesome. All right. Well, so I love that story. And I do agree with you that what is for you is in someone else's hands. And it is really about relationships and building those relationships within this business that seems so businessy. And some people can make it that transactional, but if it's transactional, it's not really worth it, right? Like now you have this incredible probably friend for life, right? So I think that's really important to remember as we're all moving forward, that creating those relationships as we go, that's what's going to help move you forward in your business, because you never know when those relationships will be the hand that helps you up to your next level. So I think that's really important. Now,
Yeah.
since you bought that property and you've kind of moved into that, I know you have some other multifamily stuff that you're working on. Why don't we chat a
Mhm.
little bit about your current project and what you're working on right now?
Yeah. So I'll tell you, in that whole interim, we bought 1,200 units, right? So we've been busy.
Yeah.
Because that event was like, okay, I can do this.
Yeah.
And I don't ever try to do something small. Like I go head first. I put all my other companies in the hands of other managers, and we double down, and we really have created enormous amount of value in this property since we bought it. So much so, and I'm going to tell you this before I tell you about the new project. So much so that in just 2.5 years, it's going to be 3 years in March. If we sell the property this year, we will more than triple investors' capital in the deal in under 3 years. And I hear that not very many people do this in this commercial real estate world. And that's because I treated this property just as I treated every business before that I've owned, with just relentless pursuit of excellence and making sure that we grabbed every dollar of potential value that the property has. And we bought it for 18.6 million. Today, the property is conservatively $37 million in value, 2.5 years in. So when I say, guys, commercial is the way to go, commercial is the way to go,
Commercial
right?
way to go.
Proven more than once for me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. That's
So,
incredible.
yeah, and we've done it with other properties too. I have another property in Georgia that we've doubled the investors' capital in just 2 years. And now I'm pursuing a beautiful deal in Elizabethtown, Kentucky. It's called the Reserve at Cool Springs. It's 216 units. It's a brand new property built last year, 99% occupied. There's a small plant being built 15 minutes away, only $5.8 billion plant, the largest in the whole planet for electric vehicle battery manufacturing. So if you haven't heard, Kentucky and Elizabethtown in particular will become the world's capital of EV battery manufacturing in the whole world. So jobs, right? If you're investing in real estate, guys, look at the jobs. If jobs are coming to the area, you better buy real estate there, because jobs increase the per capita income, is where the money created, and you want that demand so that your real estate can grow fast. So we're incredibly happy again. This is one of these deals that it's, in my eyes, something that I only dreamed of a few years ago. A lot of people are coming with us. I am the biggest investor always. I invest a lot of money of my own capital and my family as well. And a lot of people that connect with us understand what we do now. So I'm super excited, Kim, because this is just one of many that we'll do on our way to build $1 billion portfolio in the next few years.
Yeah, I don't think we even touched on that. So like that is your next level, right? Like that's your what's next, is that going from your first commercial property to $1 billion of assets under management. And I think that's really incredible. Well, I want to be respectful of your time. And so, you're actively raising capital for this current deal. If anyone is interested in learning more and hearing more about this opportunity, how can they get a hold of you? Where can they find you?
Yeah, so I'm really easy to get a hold of. You can go Google my name, Carlos Salguero. You'll find me on YouTube, on Instagram. on my website, cs3investments.com. Our brand is infinitecashflow.com. So I'm really easy to find. My Instagram is I am Carlos Infinite. If you speak Spanish, is I soy Carlos Infinito. So like multi-language, it's very hard not to find me if you really want to find me.
Awesome. So everyone, if anyone is interested in learning more, please reach out to me or reach out to Carlos directly. This is an incredible project that he's working on right now with some incredible projections for anyone who's looking to deploy some capital right now. It's a great time and a good place to be investing. Carlos, I love watching this transformation. Watching this transformation is so cool because, like you said, with that guy on the stage of $3,000 to whatever he was making at that point, that if you can do it, we can do it too. And so thank you for being
That's
an
right.
inspiration to us and to those around you of, anyone can do it. It's just a matter of being that lifelong learner and putting in the reps and just going for it. So thank you so much for your time today.
So true. Thanks so much, Kim.
Absolutely. All right, everyone, until next week, thank you so much. Have a good one.